Thank you for coming today, folks. Thank you for participating in the first Mabel kind of sponsored event. The Mabel Tainter is a 130-year-old theater located in western Wisconsin. We're dying to do content and be an entertainment resource for all of our patrons. And we're blessed to have Dieter Boumans today talking to us about alt beer, amongst other things, and helping represent the international contingent. And I pass off to my co-host, Steve Weghorn, esteemed board member of the Mabel Tainter. Thank you, Steve, for your service. All yours.
Thank you, sir. As Jeff has mentioned, that everyone here is on mute right now. We're doing that to make sure we don't get any bar fights breaking out. But we do want this to be informative and interactive, and so we do want to get everyone involved if we can. This is a smallish group, so that should be able to be done. In order to be heard, just go ahead and send a chat to everyone or to just Jeff. He's our moderator right now. You can do that using the Zoom feature there. You can also use the raise hand feature in Zoom that's in the participants panel to indicate to Jeff that you'd like to add your 2 cents to the conversation. Of course, you can also lurk in the corners of our little virtual bar here just to enjoy the ambiance if you'd like as well. But your choice here. This is a social hour, and as the name implies, it is intended to have a hard stop after 1 hour of fun. So, during the time that we're together, we're going to try to engage with everyone here if we can. So hopefully with this group, we can get everybody involved. Do note that this social distancing togetherness is being recorded for future online sharing purposes. Depending upon your level of participation, your voice, picture, and/or video may be captured as part of the recording. If you choose to not participate in this recorded session, exit Zoom now. Otherwise, you're part of the fun here. For those that are participating, and hopefully everyone will participate significantly, please, of course, keep it tasteful and respectful, as I'm sure everyone can. Jeff, back to you.
Thank you. And what we're looking for, too, is if anybody has any ideas about an event that they would like to host, would love to entertain that and be able to make this a regular weekly event. Let's see, what else was I supposed to cover here? And so any topics, just email me. I'll put that into message to everybody so you can have my email address. And then just send me something and we'll get something scheduled. I appreciate everybody's participation.
Perfect. So we do hope you'll enjoy this event. And boy, that beer's going down smooth already, I guess. Do feel free to enjoy a beer with us. I've got mine. As we are bellying up here to the longest virtual bar in the world that Dieter will hopefully give some sense to what I mean by that, what we mean by the longest virtual bar here. But basically, without further ado, then let's get social with Dieter from Cologne, Germany. Dieter, take it away.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me. So I got directly thrilled when Steve contacted me and shared the idea of doing a social event for the Mabel Tainter Theater and talk about beer and chat with beer enthusiasts from a couple of places in the world. As you might realize, I'm not a native speaker, so I think I have a nice German accent. What I am not realizing anymore, and I make nice typical German mistakes when I speak English. But yeah, I hope everything is understandable what I'm saying. And the good thing is, the more I drink, the better it gets. So I start with that now. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, so I'm going to talk about alt beer, especially Düsseldorf style alt beer today, and I prepared some slides, so I'm going to share my screen in a second. And I think Jeff mentioned it, after I did the introduction of alt beer, we should have a chat, and we should not only talk about alt beer, I would like to learn what your favorite beers are, and hear some nice stories around beer from you guys as well. Let's start. All right, I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes, I can.
All right, so this is a nice impression from Düsseldorf. And so before we start talking about alt beer, I would like to first give you some background about the region we are talking about, because alt beer is really a regional beer. And you might have no idea about which region we are talking about. And then I would like to invite you to a kind of a time jump, and that takes us back to a guy called Henrik, and he has something to do with the three holy kings. And I'm not going to tell you that the three holy kings, Caspar, Melchior, and Balthasar, offered alt beer to little Jesus baby. The story is a little bit different. And after
we might
that,
have had a different history if that were the case, though, wouldn't we?
pardon? What did you say?
We might have a different history if they had offered beer to the baby Jesus.
Yeah, maybe. After that, I'm going to explain what makes alt beer alt, because as you might know or have Googled, I don't know, alt is a German word for old. So it's old beer, what we're talking about. Then I'm going to take you from the guy Henrik the brewer to Düsseldorf style alt beer and explain a little bit what happened in between. And then I talk about the four remaining house breweries in Düsseldorf Old Town, which is today, if you like, the heart of the alt beer culture. And after that, I prepared something about hidden beers from Düsseldorf. These are special alt beers, which are only brewed for special occasions. I'm going to share something about brewhouse lifestyle in Germany, and some impressions from the longest bar in the world, which is Düsseldorf Old Town, an area of like 2 square kilometers, maybe 3 square kilometers, I don't know, with more than 500 bars and pubs. And you might think, okay, now we are talking about a beer which is 7,000 miles away. What I am doing with that information, the good thing is there is alt beer very close to you. So there's one more part of the story, which is about what's in it for you guys. All right. Okay. So when we talk about Düsseldorf alt beer, and as a regional beer, we talk about the Lower Rhine area. And what the Lower Rhine area is easy to understand when you look at the picture on the very right bottom. There's obviously a river, which is called Rhine. The area around the river is flat. There are no hills or mountains. That's why it's called the Lower Rhine area. It's part of the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, which is, from population perspective, the biggest state in Germany. Capital is Düsseldorf. And if you look at the map, I'm absolutely sure that most of the names of the city doesn't mean anything, or won't mean anything to you, and you have never heard about cities like Nettetal, Krefeld, Viersen, Erkelenz, and stuff like this. This is the reason why I'm trying to set that in a context for you guys. There should be some cities, you know, like Amsterdam here at the very top of this map, like Brussels in Belgium, and you can see the Rhine area, the Lower Rhine area here. It's in the northwestern part of Germany, at the border to the Netherlands and Belgium. Relatively small area, and this is the area where the alt beer is from. Give me a second, please.
A most important break.
Absolutely, yeah. All right. Okay, now I would like to take you on a journey, and this journey takes us back about 750 years in time, to the year 1266. And in 1266, there was a gentleman, and his name was Henrik the brewer. And with Henrik the brewer, the story of alt beer starts. Henrik was running a guest house which was located on a road which connected the northwestern part of Europe, the places which are today called Netherlands or Belgium, and places like this, with I think the biggest city north of the Alps at that time, and that was Cologne, with at that time a population of several thousand people. And Henry's guest house was a place on a road where people could find a bed, get a meal, get something to drink, and get energized to continue the way to Cologne the next day. And as you can see here, what Google calculated, not at Henrik's time, but when I did that yesterday, Cologne is roughly a good day walk away from the place where Henrik had his guest house, and his job was to keep people energized and enable them to do the trip to Cologne within one day, because if they wouldn't make it in a day, it would become quite dangerous because there were many nasty people around at that time. And so he provided them with food and a bed and beer. And beer was a very important part of nutrition at that time. So there was beer almost always for anybody and for any meal. So even children were drinking beer. And beer was what was the stuff which helped people to stay powerful and energized. And we can assume that the road was quite busy at that time, whatever quite busy means 750 years ago. But that road was used by traders who were trying to come to Cologne to sell their goods. And it was used by pilgrims who were on their way to Cologne, because 100 years before Henrik set up his guest house, there were the bones of the three holy kings, Caspar, Melchior, and Balthasar, brought from a cathedral in Milan to the cathedral, or a church. There was not a cathedral at that time, to a church in Cologne, and they were buried in Cologne now. And until today, Christians believe, especially Catholic Christians, that they get blessing and that all their sins are washed away when they touch the shrine where the bones are in. And what you can see here on that map is the Cathedral of Cologne, under that map, and the Golden Shrine as it looks today. And at that time, there were many people trying to get to that city. And Henrik had the brilliant idea of brewing a stronger beer, because he thought if the beer is stronger, and the regular beer at that time had between, it was very light, it had between 2 and 3%. If I brew a stronger beer, people have more energy, and it's easier for them to make the way to Cologne within one day. And it was typical for that period of time that he had to ask the local ruler if he would get the permission to brew a stronger beer, and he got that permission, and he started brewing a beer which had around what people estimate today, which had around 4.5 up to 5% alcohol, and that was obviously very successful, that brew, and he served his customers with that, and that was the beginning of alt beer. And what you can see on that map is here, there is a town called Korschenbruch, and there is a name called Bolton Brewery. That is precisely the place where Henrik the Brewer, 750 years ago, had his guest house. And until 1266, until today, or since 1266, until today, it has always been a brew place. And there's today still a brewery, which is on the on this slide, in this picture on the left-hand side, which is the Bolton Brewery. And you can trace the beer which is brewed in the Bolton Brewery back to the beer Henry the Brewer brewed in 1266. And it's an uninterrupted line of brewing tradition. And that is where the alt beer really comes from and where it's still brewed today. All right. So what I would like to show you now is one of the first beers I would like to share with you. So that is the alt beer, which is today, one of the alt beers, which is today brewed in the Bolton Brewery. It's called Bolton Uralt, and Ur stands for really old. So it means really old. And it's of course not brewed in the same way like Henrik the Brewer did it some 100 years ago, because at the time of Henrik the Brewer, there were no hops. Hops came up some 100 years later, so he was using herbs to make his beer tasty, and it tasted completely different. But that's the one which is closest to the first alt beer brewed by Henrik the Brewer. It's brewed in a style which is from the last century, no, the 19th century, 200 years ago. It's not filtered, not heated. It has 4.9%. And it has a copper color, and it's very tasty. And that is, as I said, the beer which is closest to the first beer that was brewed by Henrik the Brewer. That is the Bolton Alt Beer from the Krauthaus and the Bolton Brewery in Korschenbruch. All right. Let's go ahead. So the question now is, what now makes the alt beer old? So as you can see on that, let's call it a beer family tree, and I hope you can read that.
Yep.
We have the ales on the top of that family tree, and we have other beers like lager or pilsner on the bottom of that family tree, and which is purposefully orchestrated, because on the top of that tree we have the beers which are called the top fermented ones, and on the bottom we have the beers which are called the bottom fermented ones. And as you can see, the alt beer is part of the German ales. It is an ale. It is top fermented, and top fermented basically means that that the yeast is doing its work, meaning transferring or transforming the organic ingredients of a beer into alcohol at a relatively high temperature, and that temperature is between 15 and 20 degrees, which is the natural temperature which we had most time of the year here in Germany, which simply means if you brew a beer which is top fermented, you can do it without sophisticated cooling technology. Because there was no cooling technology in the past, most of the beers in the past, before a fridge or something like that was founded, most of the beers were brewed in that style. And that changed because of this gentleman here on the left side of that page, Karl von Linde. He is a guy who you could say he is the father of the fridge. And with the fridge, it was possible to cool beer or the stuff which is produced when you make a beer with the help of technology. And it was able to run a different fermentation process, which is called bottom fermented. And for that, a temperature of between 4 or 5 degrees was required, which is hard to get if you have no cooling technology. And after that fridge has been developed, many breweries started brewing a beer with a different yeast, the bottom fermenting yeast, and the outcome of that were lager beers or pilsner beers, or all the beers you can see on the bottom part of that family tree, like porter and all that stuff. And you can say that it was a fridge who made the alt beer alt, because it's brewed in the old style, like the ales and all that stuff. And when lager and pilsner became popular, the Düsseldorf breweries intentionally and with some pride decided to call their beer alt beer, because they were still adhering to the old brewing tradition. And this is the reason why the alt beer is called alt beer. And cooling technology has made the alt beer alt. David, would you like to add on that a little bit? Because you're more into beer theory and fermentation and all that stuff than I am.
I think you've got it pretty right there, Dieter. Just one correction. If you look at this map here, it's pretty interesting, because you have the big bubble at the top that says ales and the whole family. You have the big bubble to the right that says lagers. And then there's a connection point that goes from lagers to the Baltic porter into the stout porters, which in today's world, all of those, the porters and stouts, are all ales. So there was some point when they were when they came from that Baltic porter family, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And the primary difference when you drink an ale versus a lager is the lagers are a much cleaner flavor. You're not getting much of character from the beer or from the yeast, whereas in the ales, the yeast itself contributes a lot of the fruitiness and floralness, complementing the hops as well. So that's the primary difference between lagers and ales, is that cleanliness of a lager beer. So good job, Dieter.
Yeah, and so if you look at other trees, especially family trees which are developed in Germany, I could see that there is really a discussion if alt beer is really a part of ales. It's certainly a top fermented beer. There's absolutely no doubt, and it's brewed in a different way, in a similar way like ale is brewed. But there are some differences, and there are some brewers who are making statements like that, like alt beer it's a beer family of its own. I don't know. So what I learned when I drink beer, I'm a top fermented guy, so I like everything which is top fermented. I love to drink ales or pale ales and all that stuff. And for me, it means it's very close to each other, and I have no issue if somebody says alt beer is part of the ale family. It's definitely top fermented beer brewed in the old style.
Yeah, and one of the and it does have characters of the lagers. The term lager came from the aging. So lager beers not only fermented at cooler temperatures, but they're also aged a bit in cooler temperatures as well. Then and the alt beers, they're fermented at a cooler temperature than most ales are.
Okay.
But they are also go through that cool lagering as well. So it is kind of while it technically is an ale because it's a top fermented, it has characteristics of the lagers as well.
All right. Okay.
Dieter,
Yeah.
for alts, is it none of them are done with hops? Is that kind of the designation of alt beer?
That was not what I tried to say. What I said is in 1266 there were no hops. I can't say if there were no hops in the Rhineland or no hops at all at that time, but at that time here in that area no hops were used. They were using herbs. 200 years later there were hops, and alt beer is of course made with hops, and most of the hops are coming from Bavaria, and the hops are the only ingredient which is not regional or local, because we are getting the breweries here in Düsseldorf, they are getting most of them getting their hops from Bavaria.
Are there any beers today that aren't made with hops?
There are, but that would bring me back to David. I think he tried them all. I haven't.
There's very few beers today that don't have some aspect of a hop to them, just because the hop is an herb, it's a flower, and what most of the beer styles and brewers found over time that it's a perfect herb or flower for offsetting the sweetness that you get from the malt. So there might be a style out there that doesn't have any hops in it. A lot of beers today are specialty beers you make with maybe a lower level of hop to get the bitterness in there, but then you put in there other herbs. A lot of Christmas beers and things like that have different herbs, coriander, and Belgian beers also have coriander, orange peel, those kinds of things in there, but they also have hops.
So I would be very interested to try a non-hopped beer. Does anyone know of an example of one might find?
Yeah, I know one. Coca beer from Bolivia. I tried it last year, but let nobody know.
Okay, Marlene, you're on the hook to send everyone a Coca beer. I see Paul has his hand up. Can we unmute Paul?
Yeah, so you talked about the original beer from the guest house that was using other herbs.
Yeah.
Before they switched to hops. What were they using? Do you know?
No, I don't know by heart. I can try to find that out. On what I read is only the word herbs, and that was so the guest house was called Kraushof, which means herb yard in the old language, in the old local dialect, and so the only thing they were saying is they were using herbs, but I can't tell you which herbs they were using.
You think that somebody, there's all these home brewers that would try to make that original alt beer, even if they're not going to make it at a production scale.
Yeah.
At Dave. Dave is muted.
I'd like to try that, but I want to try the one that the really old beer, Erlalt.
Yeah, I take that as a homework. I can try to find that out. But in the moment, I can't say which herbs he was using. All right. Okay. So let me go ahead. So we are marching some 100 years in time, and now I'm going to try to explain you how the Altbier tradition developed. And as I said, in the early days, Altbier was predominantly brewed in guest houses. According to my knowledge, it has never been brewed by monks. So in many other countries, especially like Belgium, it were predominantly the monks who in monasteries who brewed the beer. That never happened with Altbier. I know that monks drank a lot of Altbier. That is a common truth, but they never brewed it. And already 100 years after Henrik the Brewer started his Altbier business, the breweries got more concentrated in one city, and that was the city of Düsseldorf. And the reason why that happened is that Düsseldorf became bigger and bigger. At the time when Henrik the Brewer lived, there was no city with the name Düsseldorf. There was potentially a village. In the year 1288, Düsseldorf was given the right of a city, and with that right of a city, Düsseldorf was allowed to establish a marketplace, build a harbor, do trade, build city walls, have armed forces, and all that stuff. And Düsseldorf, because of the harbor at the Rhine and because it was located at important trade routes, it was very important for the income of the local ruler. The local ruler was the Earl of Berg, and he was living in a stronghold in the mountains, 30 kilometers away from the river. And Düsseldorf became his economic center, if you like. And only 100 years after Henrik started brewing, the Earl of Berg decided to move from the stronghold in the mountains to the new city in a new palace, and Düsseldorf became a residential city. And with that, the number of inhabitants of Düsseldorf increased dramatically, because if a ruler comes, it attracts many people to move to that city as well: craft worker, servants, armed forces, and all the stuff which is required to serve a ruler. And the city became bigger and bigger. And the earls or dukes of Berg, they were not only important rulers, they were heavy drinkers as well. And
makes a good ruler.
Yeah, that makes a good ruler, absolutely. And I picked one who is the most important one, John William, who lived in the 17th century. And at that period in time, there were more than a dozen breweries in a city with roughly 1,500, 2,000 people in there, which is really a lot. And they were all busy trying to serve the palace and the crown. And John William, he was a heavy drinker as well. And one of the pubs he loved to go to is a pub in the Canon, which is local dialect again, and it means simply in the canon. And that pub still exists today in Düsseldorf Old Town. And Düsseldorf was one of the rare European cities at that time, which had all over the town, all in the entire area of the Old Town, Düsseldorf had stone pavement, paving stones. And there was one simple reason: because John William was such a heavy drinker, he wanted to walk from his palace to each and every brewery and pub without getting his shoes dirty. And this is the reason why they built all the roads in stones. And Düsseldorf was one of the most modern cities at that time. Even Paris or London didn't have stone pavement all over the place. It was more mud or stuff like that. But during that time, Düsseldorf more or less became the capital of Altbier, and it started establishing the term. It has certainly not been called longest bar in the world at that period of time, but already at that time there were a dozen breweries, and that increased until the beginning of the 20th century up to 30 breweries, and there were more than 80 distilleries in the Old Town. And we are still talking about an area of 2 square kilometers. And of course, not only to serve the king or the ruler, for trade as well, but that already at that time, it was one of the places where enormous amount of alcoholic beverages were produced, sold, and of course drunken as well. From these 30 breweries, only 4 survived over the years, and there are 4 remaining brew houses in Düsseldorf. There are many more brands, but original Düsseldorf style brew houses, we have only 4. And what are the criteria to call a brew house a Düsseldorf style brew house? It means they have to brew in the center of the city, in the old town. So a Düsseldorf located brewer who is trying to save money and set up a brewery outside the old town, or even cooperate with international breweries, loses the permission to call the beer an original Düsseldorf alt beer. That is one very important thing. And of course, it has to have the dark copper color, which comes from barley malt and a proportion of roasted malt. That is what makes it, gives the color, the copper color. The water has to come from the old town as well. And you can imagine that the water in the old town is not necessarily very clean. So they drill very, very deep, what is Brunnen in English?
A spring or a well.
Yeah, spring or well. Yeah, right. They drill very, very deep wells, and they, to the highest possible extent, shall use organic ingredients from the regions. And most of the breweries are working together with organic farmers from the region, where they get the wheat and all that stuff from. And only hops are coming from Bavaria, as I said already. And they have to adhere to the German purity law, which means only hops, malt, yeast, and water. This is what makes beer and nothing else. And it should have between 4.8 and 5.0%, and original gravity of 11.5. And the German purity law is a kind of a trademark today, but to be very honest, it's not German, it's Bavarian. It was set by order of a Bavarian king, and it's not a law. It's you can adhere to it, you can't, but it's a nice trademark, and it's quite common in Germany. Let me talk a little bit about the different beer styles. All of these breweries are established under the same name like they're using today in the 19th century, but the brew houses are used as brewing places in most cases since the 16th century. And I would like to start with the Schlüssel brewery. And the story behind the Schlüssel is when Düsseldorf still had a city wall, the soldiers used to place the keys to the doors of the city wall in a brew house nearby, and that was a Schlüssel. The Schlüssel means key. And this is the reason why that brew house is called Schlüssel. And what they do is, where do I have it? All right, so they sell their beer in 0.3 and 0.5 liter bottles. It has 5%, which makes it the strongest regular alt beer in Düsseldorf. And it's, I would call it not bitter or malty, it's more fruity. It's one of my favorites, and it is owned by a family which is called Gatzweiler. And this family is working in the brewing business since the year 1313. And some people are saying that they go back to the guy we were talking about earlier, Henrik the Brewer. I'm not sure if that is correct, but that is a very, very old Düsseldorf brewing family. They have the brew house in the middle of the old town, and it attracts a lot of people. And the other beer I would like to talk about is that one. That is called the Urie, which is usually sold in 0.5 and 0.3 liter bottles as well. And you might remember the gentleman on the left side of the slide I was showing before. So that is the founder of the Urige. And he is the one who gave this pub the name, because an Urige in the local language, is a guy who is very unfriendly, bullying people, always in a bad mood. He is really a bitter guy. And I think this bitterness moved to his beer as well, because the Urier is said to be the bitterest beer all over Germany, not only in Düsseldorf, or not only when I talk about alt beer. And really, if you try it first, the first one is like, wow, okay, what did the brewmaster do? Second one is getting better. The third one is brilliant, and then you can't stop drinking.
And what's the bitterness? It's not barley, it's not water, it's not yeast, it's not hops. Ah! Maybe it's the hops.
I would think it's hops, David, right?
It better be the hops.
It's hopefully hops. All right. Okay, let's talk about the next one, which is that one, which is called the Füchschen. That is a brewery which is from the 16th century as well, and it's called Füchschen, which means little fox, since I think 1830, 1850, something like that. And that is really one of my favorites. It's very close to the Schlüssel I was talking about before. It's not as strong. It doesn't have 5.0. It has around 4.8%. And it's as I said, it's one of my favorites, and it's from my perspective, one of the best beers I ever had. And the last one I would like to talk about was the regular beer. So this is the Schumacher Alt, and that brewery is from 1838 and founded by a guy whose name is Schumacher. And that was the first brewery which called their beer Alt beer, in order to differentiate from the lagers and pilsner and the bottom fermented beers we were talking about before. And so they have a brew house in the heart of the old town as well. And since a couple of weeks only, there are 3.0 liter bottles which they are using. Before, they were only selling in 1 liter bottles, which is really a lot. So if you have 4 already, you really think about the 5th one, because that can really make the difference already, and that is more doable. And it's the light is light, correct? The lightest beer is it has only 4.6% compared to the other ones. It has less alcohol. It's a little bit sweeter, a little bit more sweet, but it's a very nice beer as well. So and these are the 4 old traditional alt beer brands we still have in Düsseldorf. And if you look on beer consumption in Germany, what we see is that beer consumption in total is shrinking. So it's decreasing since years. So we are drinking less beer. We are by far not beer nation number 1 anymore. So people in Belgium, Czech Republic, and other places in the world, they drink much more. And especially alt beer consumption is shrinking, but not for these 4 brands. So their volume is increasing 10% per year since more than 10 years. So it's very popular, and it's an absolutely regional beer. It's only brewed in the old town. It's only sold in brew houses in Düsseldorf, and you can get it in some supermarkets outside Düsseldorf, but it's absolutely regional. And I wouldn't call them microbreweries, because they make lots of liters per year, but I would call them the first craft breweries. So if you guys in the United States think you founded craft brewing, you didn't. We do it since 150 years.
So what do you suppose is driving the increased interest in alt beer then? Is it a marketing thing? Is it people finally going, oh, this actually tastes good? Or is it that, what's driving it?
I'm absolutely sure that is driven by the spirit of the old town. So you have been there, and on a nice summer evening when there are thousands, and I'll show you pictures later on, when there are thousands of people in the streets. And in Germany, we can drink in the streets. So you can walk in the streets and get a beer everywhere and drink, and it's an absolutely nice atmosphere, and the beer fits perfectly to it. And I think that is simply driven by the atmosphere. It's a little bit driven by the fact that Düsseldorf, the population is growing, and but I think it's mainly driven by the lifestyle in the old town and the lifestyle in the brew houses. And
Well, it has to be because the stuff tastes awful.
pardon?
It has to be the lifestyle and the atmosphere because the alt beer tastes terrible.
All right, that's what you think. And why did you empty my fridge when you were here?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So give me a second to talk about some specialities, and that brings me back to my presentation. When I was younger, and when I say younger, not more than 20 years ago, the breweries in Düsseldorf, they were really only brewing alt beer, and that has changed simply because there are younger brewmasters and not so linked to traditions anymore, and they are trying Pilsner and other beer. Can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
But you're not seeing my screen, right?
Right.
Better now?
It's coming. Yep. There we go.
All right. Okay. And some of them are today like Füchschen. They launched a Pilsner recently, or Ürige launched a lager, and they are starting producing gin and other stuff. But there are some specialties which are famous in Düsseldorf since more than 200 years already. And so I would like to start with one, which is the Laatzen beer, which, as you can see here on the right bottom side of that slide, a Laatzen beer is a beer which is a little bit stronger, and it's only brewed at 2 or 3 days a year. And what is the story behind the Laatzen beer? So 150 or 200 years ago, it was very hard for a brewmaster to always produce the same quality, a standard quality. It was not standardized, it was handwork. And that is the reason why the brew always tasted a little bit different. And when the brewmaster was extraordinarily happy with his brew, he took the brew and saved it for very important dates, in most cases religious dates like Easter or Christmas. And in order to make sure that is nobody taking this portion of beer and use it for day-to-day business, they stored it on the highest possible level in the rack in their warehouses. And the highest possible level is called in the local language, we put it up the lat. And if you put something up the lat, you do Laatzen. You lift it to the very top level and you store it there. And this is the reason why it's called Laatzen beer, because it's on the very top level of a rack in a warehouse. And it's this is produced by Schumacher, 2 days a year only, and March 21st was the day when it was released, unfortunately during the Corona crisis. So usually when Laatzen beer is out, nobody is working in Düsseldorf, everybody is in a pub drinking beer. This year it was a little bit different, and if we have time I can show a brief movie about that. So that is the story about the Laatzen beer. And then we have a beer where some people in your area might be familiar with, and this is the Stieke. The Stieke is brewed in 2 breweries, which is the Ürige and the Schlüssel. And the Stieke, like the Laatzen beer, is a beer which is only brewed, in this case, only 1 day a year. And it has around 6, sometimes 6.7%, so much stronger than a regular alt beer. The story behind the Stieke is that you see the picture with the monks on the left side of that page. I said already, monks have never been brewing beer, but they have been drinking beer, especially after Carnival and before Easter and during the fasten period. And I hope that this is a word in English, I'm not sure, where monks were not allowed to eat or only eat a little, but they still had to pray and work all day. And then they asked the local brewers, if they could provide them with a stronger beer, because a stronger beer would help them to overcome the fasten, or I think it's Lent period, I'm not sure in English, to overcome the Lent period. But the brewers didn't get the approval by the local ruler to brew a stronger beer. Nevertheless, they did it. They didn't care about what the ruler was saying, and they brewed that beer, but they did that hidden. And when you do something hidden, it's called, in the local language, you do it stike or stickum. And this is the reason why that beer is called stike, because it was hiddenly brewed, stored somewhere, hidden, and only given to the monks in order to help them to overcome fasten period. And at the beginning of fasten period, every year it is brewed again 1 day per year, and it's bottled, and you can get it directly in the brewery. And besides that one, there is another one which is called the double stike, which has 8.7%. That is produced by Uriger as well, and that is only produced for some Uriger fans in the United States. And it has only been exported to the United States for a couple of years. Since last year, it is available in Germany as well. And there's one brewery very close to you, which is brewing a double stike as well. I tried that, and it was very close to the original one. And that is the Rush River Brewery. And
do they call it that, or do they call it a stike?
They call it double stike. That was the one I had when I was talking to the young guy who was planning to go to Germany. Do you remember?
Yep.
And I was really happy that you drove and I didn't need to drive. 8.7 is not so bad. And then we have the Füchschen. That is a Christmas beer, which is a little bit stronger, like the regular alt beer as well. That has around 5.5%, only brewed for Christmas, and you can get it between beginning of December until Christmas Eve, which is a very nice brew as well.
Does it taste like Tannenbaum?
Are you talking about the beer from South Germany?
Does it taste like a Christmas tree?
No,
What makes it a Christmas
beer which is called Tannenbaum?
I mean, it's marketing. It's pure marketing, or do they throw like holly leaves in there?
It's stronger than a regular one. It's a little bit more bitter and a little bit more hoppy, and that is true for all the special brews for the stike as well.
And is that what the three kings that came through the area liked? Did they like it, Christmassy and hoppy?
I can't say that. I don't know.
Dieter,
all right.
Dieter, I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Rush River making that double stike. If I went to a specialty beer shop,
yeah,
that has beers from all over the world, could I find an alt beer that is like, would I be able to, because it's like, I've never had one, so it'd be interesting for me to try an alt beer.
So what I know is that Uriger Alt is exported to the United States. So I got a picture from a friend in Los Angeles who got an Uriger Alt beer in a regular store. So I think in a well sorted supermarket or beer store, you could get an Uriger. I don't believe that you would get other ones.
There is actually, I'm drinking one now. It's by a brewery out of Cologne called Freigeist, and Dieter is very familiar with this. I bought an alt beer today from Freigeist. So that's one that is available. They're pretty hard to find, but if you go to a big store and ask the person who purchases if they have any alt beers, they should be able to find you one.
Yeah. What I know as well is that that Füchschen is on a regular basis participating beer festivals in the United States. So there are some breweries who have a license to brew Füchschen. But only for special events. And I'm still trying to find a way to ship alt beer to Menominee in a legal manner. I did that one, and we learned that shipping alcoholic beverages by mail is illegal in the United States. And Steve was called to the mail office, and had a nice discussion with two or three officers, I don't know, about doing illegal things. And I think it ended up that he had to give them some of the beer bottles, which calmed them down.
It was well worth it. And I have to say, Fuchsin was my favorite. It did make it through.
Yeah. So what I know is that it's possible to ship from business to business. So if we would find a brewery who would be willing to ship to the Maple Tinter, for example, that might work. I don't know.
Jeff, let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Let's try to find that out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before you go too much farther, so Paul and Dieter, you can maybe go off onto this. Looks like the lighting is going to help here, but I'm drinking what's called a Kolsch tonight.
All right. Why are you doing that?
It's a Leinenkugel's Kolsch, but Dieter, do explain what the relationship is between Kolsch and Altbier.
Yeah, so I've been to a brewery in Indiana, and they were selling Altbier as well as Kölsch, and they called it the rival beers, and there's some truth in it. But this rivalry, I hope I pronounce that correctly, is not coming from the beer only. It's Düsseldorf and Cologne are really serious rival cities. So I'm living in Cologne. I'm from Düsseldorf. I grew up in Düsseldorf, but I'm supporting the wrong football club. I'm supporting the wrong ice hockey club. I'm saying wrong things during Carnival, and I drink the wrong beer. And yes, also Kölsch is top fermented as well. And nasty people say Kölsch is nothing else than Altbier. You should never say that in Cologne. Kölsch is brewed in the completely same way. The only difference is it has a different color because they are not using roasted ingredients. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong.
That is right. Yep.
Yeah.
They don't put the darker roasted malt in it, and they hop it a little bit less as well.
Yeah, and but it's brewed in the same style according to the same tradition, and it's not as strong as Altbier. It's by far not so bitter like Altbier. So if you go to a brew house or in the old town in Cologne into a regular pub and you order an Altbier, you might end up in serious trouble. And I'm really not kidding. And the same would happen to you when you order an Kölsch in a brew house in Düsseldorf. And so what we say is that these two cities, we hate each other since 800 years. We have forgotten why. But we still celebrate it. And there's a nice story that every year there's an ice hockey match between the University of Cologne and the University of Düsseldorf, and the losing team has to drink the beer of the winning team.
Oh, the horrors.
It's horrors, yeah. And when I'm in Cologne, I usually drink Kölsch, and there are good Kölsch beers. When I'm in Düsseldorf, I usually drink Düsseldorf Altbier. It simply belongs to the place and it belongs to the city. When I'm out in Cologne, I would usually not order an Altbier. There are two Altbier breweries in Cologne. The one is the Freigeist David was talking about, but the brewmaster is from Düsseldorf, and he was trying to fool the people in Cologne a little bit. He was brewing Kölsch, and 2 days a year he was brewing a dark Kölsch. And after people started drinking, he told them that it's Altbier.
One of the funny stories that my first hockey game I went to, I really realized the rivalry between Dusseldorf and Cologne. And I saw a T-shirt from one of the vendors there. It was a picture of a donkey, and the donkey in front of it had a bucket that said Altbier on it that it was drinking out of. Underneath the donkey was another bucket that said Kolsch.
All right.
Hey, so I'd like to interrupt here. We're at the top of the hour, and I said at the top of the hour this is going to be a hard stop at 5 o'clock, I think, with the audience here. As far as I'm concerned, we're just going to keep on going here. I'm having a good time, but I am going to have to refresh my beer.
Yeah, all right. Okay, yeah. Yeah, let me share a few more thoughts with you, if I may. So one is there is really a difference between the brew houses I have seen in the United States and the brew houses in Germany. And brew house lifestyle in Germany is always about eating, drinking, and chatting. So I can't remember that I have seen a brew house without food. And the food is usually quite beef heavy, as you can see here. That goes perfectly together with a good alt beer. And most brew houses I have seen in the United States, they do not really serve food. I think you need a special license or a different license for it. That's what a brewer in Indianapolis explained to me, which is quite expensive. That might have changed, I don't know, but that is one difference. Another thing is what you can see here in the middle, the tab is. So that is a typical brew house invoice, with every line stands for a beer. And the lady or gentleman who had that tab here in the middle with the word Füchschen on it, obviously did a good job. They had a lot of beer, and so if you are in a brew house in Düsseldorf, you get a beer and you don't have to pay directly. So you get a tab, and on a tab is a line. Each beer has a line, and you do not leave your credit card behind like you need to do in most of the brew houses in the United States. And if you leave, you tell the waiter, and then that is used as the invoice, and you pay, and then you go. And we are using small 0.2 liter glasses in not only in Düsseldorf, in Cologne as well. So if you think about beer drinking Germans, you in many cases might think about these 1 liter steins. So that is typical for Bavaria, but not for our region. And I like these small glasses more because it keeps the beer fresh. It can't get old because there's not enough in it to get old. You drink too fast. And when your glass is empty, you don't need to order a new one. You directly get one. So there is an automated supply with new beers. And when you don't want a beer anymore, you need to say stop. As long as you want to drink, you don't need to say anything. You just get a beer. If you don't want to drink anymore, you either say thank you, I'm done, or you place a tab on the bottom of your glass, like shown in the picture here on the top of that slide. And then the waiter knows, okay, this guy is either running out of money, drunken, or something else is wrong with this guy.
Or from Cologne.
Or from Cologne, potentially, right, yeah. And one more thing, so that is typical life in the old town Düsseldorf. So there are many streets like
Break
this.
me off a bit of that.
Sorry?
Sorry, that small distraction, sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, all right.
So what are you getting? Well, hold on a minute. What are you getting broken off a piece of? Do share.
Well, I'm married to a great cook and baker here, so there's some chocolate brownie was made earlier on today, and I didn't have any. So I missed out on the warm chocolate brownie and ice cream, but I'm going to have a little piece of cold chocolate brownie with my beer here, so it's going to be just as good. And my son here has kindly served it up, so sorry for the sorry I can't share it around. It's really good.
It looks delightful.
Yeah, and so this is how it looks. So Düsseldorf Old Town has been completely destroyed after the war. So there was not one stone on the other, and it has completely been rebuilt with the old stone. So it still looks old, and all the streets look like the street in the top middle part of that page. There's one pub after another, hundreds, thousands of people in the streets. And directly at the river, there are tents where breweries sell beer, and there's live music and all that stuff. And it's so that is kind of this together with the life in a brew house, that it is what makes Altbier popular. So that is the lifestyle out there. And so if you have the opportunity to come to the Rhineland and experience that in spring or summer, you will have a great time, I'm absolutely sure. So, and the last thing I would like to share with you before this is something which came into my mind because of Corona. So the picture here, which you can see with the coronavirus and the carnival virus, so that is roughly a month ago, maybe 6 weeks, where we thought we could simply show a long nose to the coronavirus and it would not really impact us. So there were so many people in the streets, and a month later, so that picture on the left part, that is the 21st of March. There's almost nobody in the street. But nevertheless, that was the day when the Ladsen beer was launched. And usually the streets are full. And this is Schumacher Brewery here. And there was a long discussion if they would be allowed. That was already during the shutdown. So all bars and pubs and everything was closed. And there was a long discussion if they would be allowed to sell the Ladsen beer. And at 5 o'clock on the 21st of March, there was an announcement in the social media that they were allowed to sell bottled beer in a drive-in style way. So you can see here that the road is closed for traffic and there are cars waiting for somebody coming out of that brewery and sell beer to them. And what the movie I'm showing you now is only a couple of seconds, is what happened 30 minutes after it was announced in the social media that there is Ladsen beer bottled, which you could buy from your car at Schumacher Brewery. And that's what happened. I hope you can see that. Somebody who is living on the opposite side of the road has recorded it.
Yeah.
So you can see people walking and wait a second. Wait a second. You can, I think you can't hear it. So people, 30 minutes after the announcement, one car after another one and another car and another car and another car. During the shutdown, everybody was trying to get Ladsen beer.
That's awesome.
These are your people, Dieter. These are your people.
Pardon?
Said these are your people.
Yeah, absolutely.
How are you people the powerhouse of Europe economically? You're all drunk all the time, right?
Okay, so and this is the last slide I have, and this is the last part of my story. So somebody was asking the question, where do I get good alt beer from? I have no idea if somebody has been to Lake Mills already, and there are honestly not many reasons to go to Lake Mills. But I drove there on the way from Chicago to Green Bay. I wanted to see the Packers playing. And I know that Lake Mills is not on a direct way from Chicago to Greenville, but there's a brewery which is called the Turania Brewery, and they sell an alt beer, seasonal alt beer, which is called the Headless Man, which I find a very nice name for an alt beer, by the way. And I think you can get it bottled sometimes in close to Menominee as well. So that is a very good interpretation of an alt beer. Wisconsin Brewery sometimes has an alt beer. What I found out that a company called CJW, I think that is a distributor. They sell often alt beer, even alt beer directly from Germany. Rush River has this double sticker, which is very good. And if you come to, I found that one, New Glarus, which I didn't try, but they have an alt beer as well. And if you ever come to Minneapolis, which might be more likely than ever coming to Lake Mills, there is a Clockwork Brewery. And we have been there exactly 2 years ago, David and Steve and a couple of other friends, and we were visiting the Frozen Four. And it took us a minute after David landed at the airport, he found out that there's alt beer in the Clockwork, and we all went to the Clockwork, and we ended up in front of an unfortunately empty liter bottle of Schumacher. And one of the owners lived in Düsseldorf and has a close relation to a brewmaster from a brewery in Düsseldorf, and they have a very good alt beer as well. So the one which is really closest to original alt beer from Düsseldorf is the one we had in the Clockwork. That's the alt beer story.
The Headless Man, by the way, is you can get that. It's seasonal, but you can get that at Woodman's in Eau Claire. So Paul and others, if you're interested in giving it a try, it is good. Keith, our resident beer expert, tells me that the Rush River Uber Alt, which I'm guessing that's the Stika because it's the 8% alcohol, that's available here in Menominee at the marketplace.
Yeah, that is not typical alt beer because it's much stronger, but that was really a good double sticker.